Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1100, 1100, Sunday, April the 12th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so the big news that broke late on, I guess it was late Friday evening before I did my video on Saturday, before I did my video for Saturday. And of course that big news, and really there was two. There was one that occurred on Friday morning. That was Joe DeGeneva. When he did his normal Friday morning mornings on the mall interview, which he does, I think, just about every week. And then, of course, the one that got the most play was John Solomon going on to Sean Hannity's radio show and casually mentioning the fact that John Durham has multiple grand juries impaneled and that witnesses have already been subpoenaed, they have testified, and that this has been going on for several weeks. So now a lot of things are starting to make more sense. Of course, we saw things really picking up here just a couple of months ago. We saw certain things being done, certain people being put in place with Attorney General Barr, putting in a new D.C. attorney who is over all of the U.S. attorneys and prosecutors in D.C. John Durham put his own point man in charge in Connecticut. And, of course, we see these declassifications, we see these firings, we see these inspector generals being removed, we see all these things sort of happening. So I think that these things have been in the works. And then, of course, we get this latest story last week that John Durham, right in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, when you would think that he'd want to be home with his family back in Connecticut, where, you know, they obviously, it's what most people during the coronavirus pandemic are, it's kind of driven them back to their home turf, where everybody's trying to lock down with their family, everybody's trying to stay connected with their community. But here John Durham pulls a 180, jumps in his car and drives a fairly long distance from Connecticut down to Washington, and instead of doing what he normally does is come in town. He usually flies into town once about every 2 weeks, has some meetings, and goes back to Connecticut. But he doesn't this time. He drives down in his own vehicle and he stays. He's in D.C. As far as we know, he's still in D.C. Now, he may have gone back, but as of here a few days ago, he's still in D.C. somewhere. Don't know where. I don't know where he could get a hotel, but I guess he probably doesn't need a hotel. My guess is someone's putting him up somewhere in D.C. So this means that obviously things are getting down to the wire. There's some reason that he would come down here at such a crucial time when you think he'd want to be back in Connecticut. But obviously we can now see that these things are happening, and this has been coming for quite some time. So let's go ahead and cover the two statements by John Solomon and Joe DeGeneva. So first let's just cover DeGeneva first. So Joe DeGeneva is on Mornings on the Mall on Friday morning, and he says, quote, "The Durham investigation is targeting John Brennan. Brennan is in fact the target of the Durham investigation. A number of people from the intelligence community who were interviewed or went before the grand jury with Durham have told associates that all of the questions were about John Brennan. What he was doing, what was the basis for what he was doing, and they are delving deeply into the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, that was done and ordered by President Obama, which was fake from the beginning." So here's DeGeneva on Friday morning admitting that he personally knows people who have received subpoenas and have testified in front of John Durham's grand jury, and that all the questions that are being directed at them about John Brennan and his activities surrounding Spygate, particularly in reference to the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment. And we can assume that there's probably questions in there about his relationship with Christopher Steele, probably when he really learned of the dossier. We know what he says. He says he didn't learn about the dossier till after the election, sometime in December. Of course, we know that's total bullshit, because he's the one that called Harry Reid on the phone long before that, back in the late summer, called Harry Reid on the phone and gave him information and said, hey, you need to put some pressure on Comey. And the information he gave him was straight from the dossier. So Durham knows that Brennan is lying. And, of course, as Durham has said, Solomon agrees. Other people who know the same have said yes, that Durham's team have interviewed quite a few people from within the intelligence community. They got Brennan's schedule, his emails, his texts, his phone calls. It's got it all. They reviewed it all. And I imagine that there's also some interest in what his activities were during the summer of 2016 when we knew that Brennan was flying all over the world. He went to Russia, he went to Europe, he went to Australia. He was various places, and in the process he used 3 different aliases as he was carrying out these trips. So some very interesting, peculiar behavior by Mr. Potato Head in the late summer of 2016. There we have firsthand evidence from Joe diGenova, who does know people who have been called in front of the grand jury, John Durham's grand jury. Now, then we get John Solomon on Sean Hannity's radio program, and he says, quote, I've seen some evidence of grand jury work in the last 4, 5 to 6 weeks. It's been going on even in the middle of the pandemic. I know of some witnesses that have received subpoenas. I know of some witnesses that have appeared before the grand jury, taking place in D.C., in the D.C. area. Could be multiple places, but where this is going on, but the ones that I'm most familiar with came out of the D.C. area. So there he's telling us what we pretty much assume is that there will be multiple grand juries, and they may not all be in D.C., but the ones that John Solomon and diGenova are familiar with are the ones in D.C., and both of these guys saying they know people who've received subpoenas, and they know people who've actually testified to these grand juries, John Durham's grand juries. So what do we make of all this? Well, yeah, the multiple grand juries. Of course, when you have a criminal conspiracy this big with this many different compartments, you're probably going to use separate grand juries, because when you get into a conspiracy case, if you try to throw too much at a grand jury, it becomes confusing, and it also makes it pretty easy for, say, a defense attorney. The more stuff you throw out there, the more a defense attorney or the more questioning can happen in a juror's mind as they have trouble processing these complex things. So what Durham is doing, it appears, based on what we're hearing from Solomon and diGenova, that he is impaneled multiple grand juries, and he's probably compartmentalizing this conspiracy so that it keeps it simple and straightforward, so that each grand jury is just focused on one particular compartment of the overall conspiracy. This will keep it from getting muddied up and getting confusing for the grand juries. In other words, he's going to do both tracks. I suggested he might do one or the other. He's actually doing both. He's looking at individual criminal violations of the criminal code, and then he's also looking at the larger conspiracy. But he is going to first go with the individual criminal violations and using multiple grand juries, which each one focuses on a different compartment. And then once he's put all these grand juries together, he's acquired all the information from all the grand juries, has gotten all the witness testimony from all the individual components or compartments of the conspiracy, then he can take and put it all together to create the overall conspiracy, and then we'll likely have another grand jury or two that will take a look at the overall grand conspiracy based on the findings of the previous compartmentalized grand juries. This is likely the way that he's approaching it, which is very smart, because I wondered how he was going to do this. It's very difficult to go in front of a grand jury, or any jury for that matter, and try to hand them such a wide-ranging crime. And in this case, many crimes involving many people, which means conspiracy. So by breaking it down into individual compartments, it makes it easier for each grand jury to swallow. And then once you have the all the individual grand juries, the totality of all of them, you bring them together, and you make that ultimate conspiracy charge using everything you've learned from all the more compartmentalized grand juries. So this is a very brilliant move by John Durham. And I expect, it looks to me like what he's doing, because from what we're hearing from DeGeneva, he says that the witness that he's familiar with, or witnesses, I can't remember if he used a plural or singular, but with a witness or witnesses that he's familiar with that testified to the grand jury, telling him that all the questions were about Brennan and his activities, what he was doing, why he was doing it, where he got information. It was deep, deep dives into Brennan and the intelligence community assessment. So I assume that the way that Durham is looking at this is he's first looking at the intelligence side of things, which is the origin. So Durham, obviously at this point in his investigation, believes he has found the origin for everything that happened that went through the FBI, the State Department, the Department of Justice. All these things originated with intelligence, and that would probably mean domestic and foreign. Now he's primarily focused right now on the CIA and Brennan, but he will likely have other grand juries that may be looking at foreign actors, and he'll likely take the information he gets from Brennan's grand jury. He'll use that to take a look at the activities of, say, foreign intelligence operatives, whether it's governments, agencies, private contractors, individuals, what have you. So he'll be looking at that, and that'll be another compartment. Then he'll likely take that. So he's kind of working this thing from the originations. He's following it all the way through, from the origins of the activities of 2016, the origins being the Russiagate conspiracy, then moving into Operation Crossfire Hurricane, and then once you get there, then you have the election, then you have the inauguration, January 2017, then you have that whole slew of activities that occur from that point forward, leading up to the Mueller investigation and beyond. So it looks like this is what Durham is doing. He's starting from the origin and moving right on down the path. So we can expect that once he completes looking at these origins, that being in the intelligence community and possibly involving foreign intelligence agencies, private contractors, foreign agents and things and such, he'll probably move from that point into, and this would of course include people like Confusion GPS, probably the Clinton campaign maybe, and how they're connected with Confusion GPS, Christopher Steele, maybe Downer, Misfit, people like that. He'll move through all that kind of pre-Operation Crossfire Hurricane origins. Then he'll move into the Operation Crossfire Hurricane. That will bring you in groups like the FBI, the DOJ, and specifically counterintelligence, and FBI counterintelligence, the DOJ NSD, the FBI NSB, which involves this multi-agency task force, this National Intelligence Council. All of that would fit into this part of the this compartment, let's say, and then you'll move on to another compartment, which is the post-election stuff, which would be the activities. And we already know that Barr told us that Durham had discovered a tremendous amount of documentation and facts from that period of Trump's inauguration up to the Mueller investigation. That in itself is probably going to be a separate compartment. Then, of course, the Mueller investigation itself is going to be another compartment, and then the things surrounding all that. So it looks like this is the track that Durham is taking, using multiple grand juries and compartmentalizing each one. And then at the end of it all, he'll likely put it all together, and there'll be another grand jury that will hear the overall conspiracy case. But instead of having to break down all the individual parts of the components of it, that will have already been done. It will have already been established by other grand juries, so that when he presents this in his final grand jury for the conspiracy, the overall conspiracy, these will be known facts, evidence that has come out in other grand juries. So it won't be, he won't be asserting things. He'll be basically telling the grand jury, from a previous grand jury, we learned that such and such and such occurred. So and so did this and this and this. We have learned this and this and this. So it makes it much easier then, because it's all broken up into pieces. He just has to put it together, and then the final grand jury, the overall conspiracy, is just putting the icing on the cake. It's just wrapping it all up, tying it all together. So that's what it appears to be. Clearly, there are going to be criminal prosecutions, indictments, obviously, criminal prosecutions. Now, the only question is who and how many. That is probably a very good question. There's various people have opinions on that. They'll just go for a few people here and there to make examples of them, maybe mid-level people, things like that. I tend to disagree with that. My thoughts is that, as we know, this was different. Everything that was done from Operation Crossfire Hurricane, the Mueller investigation, really different from what normally happens, where normally these things are conducted by field offices, by upper management, middle management, things like that. It generally isn't the director, the assistant director, the head of the CIA, the head of the NSA. It normally isn't these top tier people, running investigations. But this is what happened in the Spygate fiasco. It was all really run by the very top tier, the top people. And then there was a level or two below them who were brought into their small group. And they kept everything within this small group and kept everyone else kind of out of it. So this is different. So I believe that what we're going to see is that the indictments that are going to come down initially are going to be on the top tier players, the Comeys, the Brennans, Clapper, people like that, Strzok, Page, people like that, McCabe. And I believe that you're going to see people plucked out from the FBI, intelligence, people within the government. And then so I believe that you're going to see those top tier people who are initially going to be the ones targeted. I believe that probably a lot of people below them probably have turned and are providing evidence to Durham, and therefore they will get off the hook because they have cooperated. And they're the reason why he's going to get Brennan and Comey and Clapper and McCabe and people like that. These lower tier people have turned on the top players, and the top players were really running it anyway. So I think that you're going to see probably on the government side, U.S. government side, I think you're going to see those top tier players indicted. And I think it will be all those players. I think it will be Clapper. I think it will be certainly Comey and McCabe. Obviously Brennan. Likely you'll get into maybe the next tier down, which would be your Peter's Been Stroking Us, Loose Lisa Page, people in that group. Then I think that you're going to have another group of people, which is going to be these private contractors. And that's going to be people like Confusion GPS, likely Stefan Halper, Downer, Misfid, Mr. Greenberg, all these individuals who are private contractors or who are being privately contracted by the government to work in this scam. Then, of course, you have the foreign actors. Now, I'm not sure exactly how he's going to handle that with people like Christopher Steele, Alexandra Chalupa, various people like that. It's a little bit trickier with these foreign people. We have extradition treaties with Australia, the UK, Italy. So I'm sure we could get these people extradited. And I'd say it's 50-50 whether or not that's going to happen. I don't know. Then, of course, you have the political class, who also had a very big role to play in this, which would be people, obviously, the Right Reverend Clinton. It was her campaign that paid for the dossier, was pipelining this stuff. They were knowledgeable about that. We understand in the last couple of months we've learned that there was daily briefings given to the Right Reverend Clinton about the what was going on in the whole scam. She was keeping very close track of it. So how much they're going to try to tie political people into this. Of course, we know that the late Senator Magoo was deeply involved in this. We know that people like Adam the Bug-Eyed Fool Schiff was likely aware of a lot of these things. He certainly lied to Congress. He engaged in some very obstructionist type things that would go against what he knew, so he could be looking at problems. I don't know what Pelosi knew, but top Democrat in the Congress probably knew a lot. You're going to have people like Warner and Burr who were having these conversations, trying to get Steele in to testify, trying to work a deal with Deripaska. So you've got the political class involved, and this could include the political people in Ukraine, the political people over in the UK, political people in Italy. We know that there were meetings with Obama and Italian head of the Italian government back in the late summer of 2016 as all this is going down. We know that we had this Eric Sharmella, the fake whistler, having his meetings there in the White House with Ukrainian officials. And so you get people like Sharmella and people like that. They probably will be looked at as well. Then you've got the legal side of it, the DOJ side, where you've got a lot of players here from the DOJ side, the legal people, the lawyers who should have red flagged a lot of this stuff, certainly in regards to these surveillance warrants, Carter Page. So you're talking here about, of course, Atkinson. You're talking about probably Mary McCord, Sally Moyer, John Carlin. You have some other people there in that mix. They're certainly going to be carefully scrutinized, possibly involved in the criminal activity. Then, of course, we have the other stuff that starts to get into the Obama administration. And that's probably the trickiest part, is how deep will they go into the actual Obama administration. And I think that could have a lot to do with what the FBI, what the FISA court learns about these 29 U.S. persons who had FISA warrants on them. Because if, as they have told the FBI, that they've got, I think what it is now, a little less than 60 days to present the names and the docket numbers of those 29 Americans. If those people turn out to be political people, political opponents, which means they could be journalists, it could be politicians, they could be people associated with the Republican Party, people associated with the Trump campaign, and if one of them people turns out to be President Trump himself, or someone like Steve Bannon, or very top tier people within the Trump campaign, if they were some of those 29 people, that is going to be a serious criminal violation there. That, of course, would get you into the Obama White House, because if as you remember, Nunes went over to that skiff. He observed unmasked conversations that were extremely troubling to him. These were not terrorists. These were not anything other than political people. Nunes pretty much told us that at the time. Associated with the Trump campaign. Again, it could be even Trump himself. They may have listened to his calls, unmasked his calls. Could be Bannon, could be Kushner, could be all these people. If any of these 29 people turn out to be political people associated with the Trump campaign, that opens up an entirely new area of this investigation, which will take you directly into the Obama White House. Because for that to happen, Susan Rice would have had to have known. These unmaskings of these political officials in the Trump campaign would not have happened without the knowledge of the National Security Advisor. And if Samantha Power's name is the one that's on the ticket for requesting all these unmaskings, she says that they were not all her unmaskings, that someone was obviously using her name. That raises a lot of questions. And of course, it takes you right to Obama, because none of this would occur without him knowing about it. We also were told a long time ago by Tony, what's his name? I can't remember his name now, the former military officer, that all counterintelligence operations must be approved by the president. That would take you Operation Crossfire Hurricane. So I do think that this will find its way to Obama's doorstep. Whether or not we're looking at people from Obama's administration being indicted, that's something that they generally try not to do. But, if they have no choice, if that's where it leads Durham, that may be where they end up. Now, I think that in regards to the FISAs on Carter Page, clearly they lied to the FISA court. They committed fraud on the FISA court. There's a lot of people involved in that. Everybody who signed off on the FISAs, there were four of them. And of course, two of them have already been found to have been fraudulent, and I'm sure the other two will now, since we just had the declassified footnotes showing that Papadopoulos clearly was rejecting any idea that he or the Trump campaign had anything to do with the DNC hacks. So anyone who signed off on the FISAs, those are legal affidavits. I think that you could be looking at anyone who signed off on the FISAs, and that's the top tier of the FBI NSB, the top tier of the DOJ NSD, and that would be Obama administration officials. Sally Yates, the deputy AG, signed off on one of those. Comey signed off on two. McCabe signed off on one. Dana Buente signed off on one. So you have these people. You also have these other factions, which I'm not so sure that they fall into criminal liability, but they're certainly going to suffer a tremendous amount of embarrassment because their role is going to be known, and that would be the lying criminal mainstream corporate media. They obviously were working in coordination with the intelligence community, the FBI, on these leaks. It was a leak strategy that they were pursuing. It will be very difficult for certain people in the media to pretend that they didn't know what they were doing. So at the very least, even if there's not criminal actions taken against them, they're certainly going to have their reputations damaged greatly, and there'll be a tremendous amount of embarrassment. There's going to be criminal prosecutions. I'm expecting somewhere between initially 2 to 3 dozen, 25 to 35 fairly high-level players, probably indicted in the short term, in the intermediate. But I also believe that that after Durham does his thing with these top 25, 35 of the chief criminal conspirators, the ones directing this operation, then I believe he will, at some point when this is completed, I think he will make criminal referrals over to the Department of Justice for probably dozens and dozens of other individuals that were in the scope of his investigation, but quite honestly, he doesn't have the time or the resources to literally investigate every single one, but many of them would come up as suspicious in his overall investigation. He's trying to get to the top tier players who directed this, who controlled it, who planned all this, who carried all this out. Those are going to be the people Durham focuses on. So I believe that he'll probably indict 2 to 3 dozen people. I think that they'll be the top tier. Then I think there'll be a lot of second, third tier people, maybe people in the peripheral, that he'll give criminal referrals back to the DOJ. I believe that there could be some foreign entities where they do use extradition to bring them here to testify. There could be charges laid on some of those people. And then, of course, probably the one that I think is probably the most surprising of all of these that could come about is people involved in the Mueller witch hunt. Certainly Uncle Bob the Executioner knew day one when he took over this investigation that the investigation he was looking at was a fraud. That evidence had already been produced. They knew Carter Page was not a Russian agent. They knew that Papadopoulos was not a Russian agent. They knew that the dossier was bunk. They knew all of this when Durham started his investigation, yet he carried it out for 2 years. There's a lot of problems with that. And I also think that there's going to be a lot of people who are associated with the attempted frame-up of Papadopoulos that are also going to be touched by this in a criminal way. They'll be found criminally negligent as well and will likely be charged. And keep in mind, the takedown of Papadopoulos happened during the Mueller witch hunt. His initial first couple interviews and attempted setups occurred before Mueller, but the actual arrest of Papadopoulos, plus that little fiasco that took place in Israel when they dropped the 10 grand on him, that was all during the Mueller witch hunt. And Andrew Weissman would have been the key player there, Andrew Weisass. So I do believe that this is going to also touch into the Mueller team, and you could certainly see maybe some referrals from John Durham to the Department of Justice to take a closer look if any criminal activities took place within the Mueller team. I think there'll be cases made for all of this. So I think that this, once the indictments come down and the major plot is revealed, I think that will be the beginning of what will likely take anywhere from 2 to 3 years to finally unravel. And I believe that when the smoke finally clears, I believe that Durham will have indicted probably somewhere in the neighborhood or reached plea agreements with 2 to 3 dozen high-level officials. I believe there will be another several dozen that will probably cop plea deals or get minimal jail time or fired or whatever from that will linger on for another couple years. Maybe these will be referred back to the Department of Justice. So we're looking at the beginning of what's going to be probably a process that will take 2-3 years maybe to totally unwind. But I believe that we're going to get the truth about the actual goings on certainly before the general election gets started. Because as you can see, Durham is well into this process now. So that's what I look for to occur here. Now, just a couple other things here. I got about 2 or 3 minutes left. Of course, I guess many of you have heard by now that this Tara Reade, this accuser of Joe Biden for his sexual assault, I guess allegations are what we're looking at, sexual assault, she has filed a formal criminal complaint. Now, it's beyond the time frame. It's well beyond the time frame, statute of limitations, I believe, for this type of a crime. So the cops are not really going to investigate it or file any charges or anything like that, but it's now at least way she's made an official complaint. Now, some people are saying, well, this will be the end of the Me Too movement. No, it won't. No, it won't. Of course, Joe Biden will get a free pass. The media won't cover it. If they do, they'll go after Tara Reade and they'll attack her, make her the victim, or make Biden the victim and make her the bad guy. They will defend Biden to the very end, and you won't hear a peep out of the Me Too crowd as it relates to Joe Biden. But the very next time a Republican is accused, they'll be back. So this is how it works with the progressive left and the demo-commies in general. They get amnesia whenever it's a Democrat accused of these things. We've seen this with Keith Ellison. We've seen it even to a great extent to Harvey Weinstein and people like that. So whenever it's a lefty, a Democratic donor, or a leftist politician, the Me Too movement goes silent. But whenever it's a Republican, they come out in full force. So this is what you can expect. I don't expect it's the end of the Me Too movement. These people have no shame, or it would be the end of the Me Too movement. But they have no shame, and they have no scruples, and they have zero principles, clearly. So anyway, we'll see how this affects the campaign. I really don't think it'll have any effect that much. Democrats really don't care about Democrats sexually assaulting, raping women. That doesn't bother them at all. It's only when Republicans do it that it bothers them. So I think that Biden will be just fine. Bernie's certainly not going to hit him on this. He should have. He should hit him on this. He should hit him on Burisma. He should hit him on China. He should have hit him on all his corruption over the years, but he simply didn't do it. And that's why he lost. And then, of course, I just saw this bizarre statement that Dr. Fauci made on CNN. I don't know why he's going on CNN, but he's on CNN, and he says that he hopes that Brad Pitt will play him on TV someday. So here's Fauci talking about someday, I guess, with there being a movie about this, and it's going to feature him or something, and he wants Brad Pitt to play him. This guy needs to go. This guy needs to go. This tells you where his mindset is. This guy's dirty as he can be, and he needs to go. Right along with the scarf-wearing magpie. Both of them need to go, and it's time to open the country up. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys. Bye.